Hi, Sarah. How are you?
Hello, I'm good. How are you?
Excellent. Thank you. So I think this is your first time joining the meeting, right?
I may have joined another one last year sometime.
Okay, then I apologize for not remembering. My memory is not as good as it should be. Others is way better than mine.
No expectations.
Yeah, so if you want, you can turn your video on. It's an open mic and camera, so at any point you can ask questions too. You're the first one in, so we were just chatting. Malachi will be joining shortly, and we'll get started.
Sounds good.
Excellent. So, and how are you doing, Sarah?
I'm doing well. Surviving the pandemic. How are you?
Ditto. Yeah, pretty much the same. So far, things are finally starting to look up a little bit. We're cautiously optimistic about being able to travel in the fall. We've definitely been missing all of our industry meetings, that's for sure. Whether we actually do an industry meeting in person this year sort of remains to be seen. So I think we'll be continuing this format for some time longer yet.
Yeah, this format actually works well because I'm able to join from anywhere. I'm a CRA normally, so I travel quite a bit.
Okay, great.
So this gives me a little bit of freedom, which is great.
Awesome. And where in the world are you joining us from?
Scottsdale, Arizona.
Nice.
So nice.
You're very warm.
It's the weather has been delightful. It's about to turn, but it's good so far.
So jealous. Our neighbors, unfortunately, they purchased, fortunately for them at the time, because they got a fantastic price, but they had purchased a 2-bedroom condo in Arizona to go to and spend time at, and it was a whole thing, and they did that and completed all their work and got it renovated and everything furnitured about 6 months before the pandemic hit.
Oh my.
And sold it 2 weeks ago.
Brutal.
They just said, we don't even know when we're going to feel. They're older too, and they're in their 70s, and said we don't know when we're willing to travel again, but we're getting no benefit out of this. So they turned a profit, but they were pretty disappointed. They loved it down there.
Wow.
Yeah.
So yeah, Scottsdale's fantastic. I've been a few times, in Phoenix as well. And I love the dry heat, and you guys have both of those in spades.
We do. Where is everybody else from?
I'm in Toronto, so I'm north of the border.
Okay.
Well, I'm technically on the east side of the city in a suburb, a little town called Whitby.
Yeah, I'm in Toronto proper.
Yeah. Yeah. Madison, thanks for joining.
Hi, thanks for the invite, Christopher.
You're welcome. Yeah, absolutely. Andrew, it's a pleasure to have you too.
Hey, Andrew.
We're
Hi, I have my video on hold because I'm eating dinner at the same time.
No worries. No. Cameras are optional.
No problem.
At any point, if you have questions, by all means, just chime in.
For sure. And I owe you an email too, Andrew. So I saw one from you. I will get back to you after this meeting.
So we've got a few more people joining in. We've got 22 registered. We usually see about half of that join in. And I'm just going to take this because I know we're waiting for Malachi. This could be him. So just bear with me 1 second.
Technical issues. Well, I am definitely very interested. I think Madison, you're a CRA maybe, and Sarah's a CRA. Very interested in your inputs because I bet you guys have been seeing quite a shift over the last year in your experiences. And I can only imagine how many more platforms, technologies, tools that you need to jump through and figure out how to use with everything that's going on.
Yeah, it's definitely been an interesting year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like a lot of the time, and correct me if I'm wrong, you guys are left a little bit in sort of a figure out how to figure out this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's tough. That's really tough.
I think the workload that got shifted to the coordinators in the last year to whatever platform everybody has moved to, whether it was, you know, uploading redacted documents, redacting the documents, printing them out, or if they have PDF files that they can do it on. That's the crux of the work has really gone to the coordinators. And I know a lot of coordinators that I love and adore are very burned out right now.
I can only imagine. And for, I mean, we're doing quite a few COVID studies right now, and also being in an intensive care situation and ER related and the work that a lot of these folks are having to do, and no one having time to even properly kind of train them. But part of the reason we wanted to have this conversation was just that what you think your site needs as a sponsor or a CRO might not actually be anything close to what they really need to be functional. Because you've been looking at all this stuff and you know, you've gone through contracting, you've worked with the site, you know all this stuff. They don't know anything. They are handed a book and a thing and maybe get an hour on a Zoom, and then good luck. Please keep up your enrollment. Yeah. No, it's tough.
So that was Malachi. He was having difficulty getting in, so I resent him the link and he's going to join in shortly.
And so it goes.
Yep.
For sure.
Yep.
For sure.
So I missed part of that, but Madison, we're definitely interested in your perspective on the topic, because from our perspective at TrialStat, we're the EDC platform that that runs clinical trials. We usually work with a CRO that typically is supposed to train the sites, the investigator meetings, and so on. And our experience, and I don't know if Heather, you touched on this at all, has been that it's not always done effectively.
Yes, it seems to be a lot kind of lost that gets supposed to be transferred down the line, but pieces fall here and there, and you don't always feel 100% confident in what you're doing when you first start, at least.
Yeah, exactly. I can imagine. Yeah. So Malachi, thank you for joining.
Hey.
This is awesome.
No problem. Yeah, I guess I should have joined 10 minutes prior.
Our experience with Zoom has been excellent. However, when it fails miserably. And we have one partner that uses Ring Central as their phone system.
Yes,
and Ring Central has an old version of Zoom built into it. And anytime they host a meeting for us, the old version gets replaces the newer version on my machine. My mic is never longer working. The camera doesn't work. Yeah.
I didn't know that happened to you. These things are pretty informal too. We like to keep this pretty conversational, so it's no worries. We start on or about a time, and we go until on or about a time.
Exactly.
Perfect.
So just to remind everyone, it is being recorded. We do share this online afterwards. So if you've got private questions that you're dying to ask us, by all means, hold those over and we can answer those off the meeting. But it is meant to be a conversation with everyone. It's our way of filling the gap of the cocktail receptions that we don't have right now at the industry meetings. So it's meant to be casual conversation. If you have your favorite beverage, you may bring it. I happen to be having an amber ale that my brother bought me for my birthday. So that's what I'm having today.
Nice.
I will introduce Malachi briefly, and then I'm going to turn it over to Malachi. I'll let you share your screen. I've known Malachi for a while now. We actually met, I think, a year and a half ago now, maybe 2 years ago. At Scope, yeah.
It feels like 2 years, but it's probably.
That was the last show we did before everything shut down, right? Wasn't that February 2020 in Florida?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously hit it off with Malachi, and since then we've been very interested in their platform and have been looking for opportunities to work with one another. And because of our recent experiences with some poor training, we thought it would be a good topic to have and bring Malachi on to talk about training. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'll let you bring up your slides, Malachi.
Great, thanks. Well, hey everyone. I think I've met a few of you before. Hi Heather again. Andrew, I don't know if we've met before, but your name does look familiar. Either way, hello everyone, and great to be here. And I know I'm relatively new to the meetup, but it's been the couple I've joined have been pretty fun. Definitely mean to keep it casual and have a good conversation. I definitely miss being in person and being able to have share drinks and go out to dinner, or even just have our standard kind of conferences. And I was excited to potentially go back. There was a smaller conference that was scheduled to be here. I'm based in San Diego in May, and it was really only supposed to be maybe about 50 or 60 people, kind of primarily sponsors and vendors. And they had a whole protocol defined, and like they were gonna do it outside in a tent, and social distance and everything. But that just unfortunately got shifted back, even though we just moved down into what California has declared as the red tier, which is the better tier. They've unfortunately moved it virtual. So I was like, dang, okay, so maybe September. I don't know.
We're cautiously optimistic for the fall. And I even like local biotech meetups and things like that, like SoCal Bio, I can certainly see them having, like a 30, 40 person meetup happening before, a big full DIA.
Right. I mean, that's really what we all, hopefully can strive for. But before I kind of jump into just a little bit of what I was prepared to at least get a conversation started, the picture that I shared with Chris that he had on the previous slide was conscious, because even I feel like I probably should update my LinkedIn too, because that person that's on LinkedIn with the suit and he doesn't exist anymore, right? Like
exist.
That person doesn't really get to go out and go to conferences and go to dinners and everything. So I just shared a very casual selfie that I took at my house, and I felt like, look, that's kind of
where we're all at right now. Yeah,
kind of where we are. And I don't know about what individual discussions you've all been having, but I've definitely appreciated that when you do get on a phone with a potential partner or sponsor, CROs, sites, whatever it may be that you work with, it's been nice to take that first 5 minutes, and it seems like everyone's been a little bit more open to just kind of talk and shoot the shit a little bit, as you will, to just open up and form a little bit more of a connection, even though you may not know that person. So I think it's been pretty helpful. Maybe that's one positive that's come a little bit out of this virtual world that we're in right now.
Definitely. Well, and I've also seen, and maybe you guys too, I've seen a higher rate or a higher interest in people wanting to actually connect online, whether that's through LinkedIn or email or whatever. They're just seeing because we're no longer able to meet. It's not like they can say, well, I'll just wait until I see them at at DIA or something. I think everybody's just more open to connecting right now.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I see Michael Young. Hi, Michael. I'm gonna call you out because I know him.
Hi, Michael.
Hi,
Hey,
Michael.
Malachi, how are you, dude?
Pretty good, man. Nice to see you. I saw your name on it. I was like, oh wow, is that a coincidence?
It is a total coinkydink.
Do you know Chris and Heather and the team?
No, never met them. Are they cool people?
Who is this man? Who let him in the room?
There's Michael's humor. Got it.
Yeah.
No, it's good to see you. No, doing well.
It's good to see you. And I'll just add that it's obvious you're picking up a tremendous amount of traction. Things are looking really, really good for SMI trial, and I applaud the effort that you're making.
Thanks, Michael. Michael's helped us out in the past couple of years, so he knows ScienceMedia
I
very
had no
intimately.
idea. I love this sort of, you just don't know until you know who knows who. It's amazing. I love this industry for that.
Yeah, and Michael, we've known Michael for years now.
Okay.
Years, yeah.
Great.
Yeah, Malachi, it just shows if you live long enough, you'll run into somebody.
This is very true. This is very true. Well, just to kick it off, kind of the topic of training in general. Lot of things that go into that. ScienceMedia has been around for over 25 years. I think we just had our 26th year anniversary in December last year of existence. I've been on board at ScienceMedia running business development commercial for a little over a year and a half, so end of 2019. So, was just getting into my first quarter when COVID hit. So, or just closing out my first quarter when COVID hit. So I was like, oh, growth. And then it was like, okay, chaos. So we've reshuffled and obviously the need for virtual training and kind of online education and better trial operations and everything has definitely increased significantly from COVID, but it's of course created a lot more noise in the system as well. So I just spend just a few minutes to cover kind of what we do and how it's relevant to the industry, and then open it up for conversation, war stories, things that are working, things that aren't working. Definitely this is not about having a commercial. This is just about sharing insights and what's working, what we see is working, what we see the challenges are. But we primarily deal directly with sponsors and potentially sometimes through the CROs as well. But we look at two core areas. One, which is foundational disease and therapeutic area training, which is our SMI Source product. This is essentially like the Google and YouTube meets WebMD of interactive media for every therapeutic area, disease state that you can think of. We've built up a library of over 350 hours of content over the last 25 years. And it's basically the kind of foundational reference that I think we're at 7 of the top 15 sponsors in the world use it. 5 of the top 10 CROs use it. So it's out there very, very broadly to really just go and get bite-sized pieces of information as you need. It's all micro learning, and that just gives you the foundation of where we're coming from taking these very complex medical topics and scientific topics and even clinical development processes, because a lot of what we have is not just on the disease and therapeutic area, but we have a lot of clinical operations, clinical drug development, training, GCP, and things to basically just give that foundation and keep your staff educated at a self-paced environment. And through the learnings of SMI Source and developing this massive library of content, working with small, medium, large sponsors, CROs, we essentially were like, look, the way that we do things, we think is very different in how it's interactive and multimedia versus a death by PowerPoint approach. We can do that on a protocol by protocol basis, right? How can we actually now take this approach from an educational standpoint? We have medical doctors, clinical writers, scientists on our team, PhDs. How can we take them, be an extension of the sponsor CRO team, and really educate the sites and the study teams in a way that focuses on the highest risk areas of the protocol? And that's what our SMI trial product is, and that's kind of where we've moved into the last 4 or 5 years, and is the growth engine of the company, as Michael alluded to. A lot of progress and demand out there in the marketplace. But it is a change, and it is a new, it's a new platform, it's a new technology, it's a new approach versus traditionally what's been done is, the sponsor, the team that is writing the protocol, very technical, very scientific, knows it. They're just taking the 150 page protocol, and no disrespect to sponsors on the phone if they're on the line here, but taking those teams as an afterthought and creating a 100-page PowerPoint, and then going and doing an IM, doing an SIV, going and trying to get the teams trained and engaged, going to get the sites, trained and engaged, and it just doesn't work. It's a check the box type of a feature. It's really not doing much that's helpful, and that's really where we come in and really think that the industry has a lot of room to grow in this area, and more so focused on the content piece of it. We have a platform behind it as well that is very specific to the analytics behind training, not just around check the box, did you complete the protocol training or the IP training or the disease state training, from an audit and regulatory standpoint, but also looking at it from comprehension. Did you actually understand it, right? Building in knowledge checks, building in actually, quizzes and questions and interactive, polls into the training, so that you can really make sure that competency doesn't just last for the 24 hours after the IM and SIV, but that's made available and you can assess and then retrain throughout the course of the whole study. And that's essentially our view of kind of where training specifically on protocols, should be and can go in the industry.
Excellent.
So I don't know if there's, war stories, questions, things that worked, didn't work. I could certainly offer up a few if there aren't any questions.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got some examples of where you've seen the results come from having used the platform, I'd be interested in hearing that.
Great.
Yeah.
Is there another question?
Go ahead. Yeah, no, I had another question, but we can tie that one after the fact.
So I'll just leave this up as kind of a background, filler, but you can see here, kind of the mobile play and the ability to, get access everywhere. But really it starts with the success comes from starting from the beginning, even though we've done a bunch of trial rescues, as well, where like trials just are not going well.
That's the area I was interested in hearing a bit about. Yeah.
So from the start or the problem area, or the rescues?
On the rescue side, but you can cover that later.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes hand in hand, but ideally, the point is right now, for the most part, kind of that education is more of a check the box, like let's just get it, done from a regulatory standpoint, versus building it in as a quality management tool, right? To actually like look at like the training plan from the beginning of the study, right? If it's a phase 3, in that planning phase, if it's a phase 2, in that phase 2 planning phase, not as an afterthought, right? As it's almost as part of your racked plan is training to make sure that the study teams and the sites really comprehend and or have the right tools throughout the course of the study. And if they go and 6 months after the SIV, they're seeing their first patient, they're like, wait, what was the protocol? What was the inclusion and exclusion criteria? Like they don't even remember it. They're looking it up, as a PDF or in doing some of our kind of site surveys and interaction with coordinators on site at the lowest working level. They're giving us feedback of like, oh yeah, I literally take a sticky note and I put it into the schedule of activities of the printout, at my desk, in the nurse's station. You're like, okay, well that's not effective, versus having the protocol in your pocket where you can just pull up your phone, like on the right side of the screen here, and just have it accessed, and in 3 clicks you get a 2-minute tutorial pop in your earbuds. It's voice, voiceovers on top of text, on top of images. So that gives you a lot more reinforcement to then not make mistakes.
Yeah.
So that you're not catching bad data at the point where you have to then go back and track down why did that bad data happen. It's too late. You've already wasted the money on that patient. You've already wasted now you're spending more time to probably go down and backtrack as to what went wrong, what site was it at, was it a staff problem, was it a procedure problem, did they inject wrong, depending on whatever the IP is. This way, having tools and knowing that your staff is trained, at least you're going to feel more confident that those errors, you're going to find them sooner. Or you're going to be able to see, hey, before we go into visit 6, where there's a new dosing regimen, let's just make sure that everybody's retrained. Let's push that out again, retake it, right? Versus just trusting that they're going to figure it out. Or worse yet, that the sites themselves are actually now creating their own training. You don't know what parts of the protocol they're emphasizing. Right. So this is,
I guess that
also
happened. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is actually recent feedback. We're actually doing a webinar with some sites and Jazz Pharmaceutical in 3 weeks. And these sites are kind of what I learned is like, yeah, they're taking whatever they get from the sponsors, they're taking that and then they're just creating their own. And if they don't get anything, they're just taking the protocol and they're creating their own training in PowerPoint to train their own staff because they know what they have to do. They see the problems in real time.
Yeah, they would all obviously they would feel that as well in terms of just performance and employee morale. If they're not, if they're not getting trained, it's difficult to run the trial. That makes sense.
Right.
It's not the
If
right
you're trying to incentivize, hey, staff, this is a big trial for us. If we get patients enrolled, it's going to be good financially for the site. And hey, this is actually this is an innovative drug. If the PI is kind of up there standing, from the pulpit, kind of yelling, hey, we really got to get these to patients because I really believe this can help people. But you don't understand how to implement it. You don't understand how to qualify the patients. You don't understand what's the right time to kind of bring it in. And that's really where it kind of flows through as a quality management solution, right? Where if you can really make sure that your staff, all the way from the study team at the sponsor or the CRO that's managing it, the CRAs, all the way down to the site level and the PIs. The PIs in some cases, and again, apologies if there's PIs on, please would love your opinion of how we can help you. But certainly again, you guys getting a bad rap. You also have, it's a tough job, right? I mean, a PI is a really tough job. But I get a lot of feedback from the site staff that the PIs they're not knowledgeable. So I go and I ask them questions, and I can't even get the answers that I need.
Right.
So how do you train differently, right? How do you actually then account that it's not just one for all? That maybe there's different modules that need to go to medical monitor or a coordinator versus a PI, or phlebotomist or something of that nature. So in breaking it up and focusing in on really the highest risk areas where you're not having them consume the entire protocol. You're like, all right, basic stuff, go look up. But really the key criteria that's going to result in bad data, that's going to result in deviations, that's going to result in remonitoring costs down the road. Let's make sure that we get that right. Let's make sure that information is front and center, and that people can access it whenever they need to, and that we're giving it to them in a way that is at least somewhat enjoyable. Not that any training is enjoyable.
Well, anything's better than reading in this
true.
stuff.
So are you integrating for some of your clients training on their EDC platforms as well, or is that still lives in its own world?
It tends to live in its own world, but it is something that we can do. So we're doing that right now with a CTMS system.
Yeah, because the thing I was thinking about is the fact that even if your content is good, by the time a coordinator has to complete work on a study, they've not only had to learn X platform, but also X platform and Y and Z and X. And even if all the trainings are good and they're quality presentations, they're still different aesthetically.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine that there's something about that consistency that would help overall globally if everything is being presented in a similar fashion, even if they're different products or platforms or pieces of the file.
That's totally right. And we don't go after that as a standalone opportunity.
Yeah.
Like we wouldn't just be like, hey, let us do your system.
Yeah.
Like that's not really what we focus on. But if it was, hey, we're doing your trial and you also want us to do the system training for the other systems, of which sometimes we're integrated. And again, this is kind of where Chris and I are talking about us partnering of like, putting our systems behind other systems so that there's one log. There's everybody's different systems and access, but there's one single sign-on for the sites to get to the EDC, to get to the CTMS, to get to the training platform on the protocol and or the other systems that you need to. That's absolutely an option.
Yep.
Got it. Interesting.
And you can also put up other study materials. I mean, it's kind of like a study portal, right?
Yeah.
There's, existing lessons learned, existing rack plans, monthly newsletters. There's a lot of other content, the IMSIV slides, right? They just want to share. The portal, it becomes just the central hub for all information, for the sites, for that protocol and for that study. And for that.
Got it.
Yeah, because we, being an EDC vendor, we obviously train, coordinators and other end users on the EDC platform, but we're not prepared or in any way available to train on the protocol. But clearly there's a way to do both. And it hadn't occurred to me that also, because it doesn't have to be like, here's how you use the EDC system. No. It could be when you want to randomize a subject, you log in here, you go through these steps, you have to do these things. You're training on the protocol at the same time.
Correct. Because I'm really
interested.
Oh, great. I mean, the way that we configure it is a GCP 21 CFR Part 11 compliant instance of the study itself, and the modules that are in that training platform, it's defined by the sponsor, right? So if they want to put EDC training in there, if they want to put, we can make as many as you want. If you look at the screens that I'm showing, right? I mean, that's just kind of our sample that we use, but there could be 5 of those, there could be 20 of them. I mean, you can make them however many you want. So it's very customizable.
Yeah.
I was curious to know if any of our, we've got a few site folks here, anybody else in the group has some thoughts on the good, bad, and ugly of site training while we're talking about this. Maybe.
I'm in.
Not a site perspective, but I had a question on the risk aspect of it.
Sure.
Is the assessment of the risk coming in from the initial steps of setting up the system, or is the risk being assessed and let's say real time, or even like a feedback kind of mechanism where you can evaluate how the different sites are performing and reinforce the areas where you identify risks evolving? Is it like a bit more of an alive kind of version, or is it more of like a, this is where we identified the risks initially with the protocol, and we're going to highlight those areas very, very well?
It's more so the latter, but it does take into account the former as well.
Got it.
So I'll explain.
You zeroed right in on the main point of my discussions with Malachi originally, which was as the trial is being conducted, if we're seeing a high rate of queries, on a particular data point or visit or something, then there could be a hook back into ScienceMedia to help the data management team understand whether or not that site, maybe their training was done, but it's about to expire and then they need to be retrained. So it could actually trigger a retraining request for the site.
Absolutely.
And my favorite phrase, automagically.
Automagically. That's
Right?
good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, is it Amin?
Yes, you got it. Yeah.
Great. It's actually my uncle's name. But I don't want to assume that you say it the same way.
Yeah, it's exactly right.
So as part of our process, because we have what we call the team of the sponsors' peers, right? We have clinical the doctors, clinical scientists that have come from pharma, that have come from sites, that like they're on our staff, like we're an extension of their team. Focus on running the trial, focus on getting the protocol right, focus on all the 150 other things that you need to do. Let us interpret the protocol. Let us come to you with the suggestions of the highest risk areas. And then there's a short conversation of, did we miss something? Are these the right areas from your perspective? But you don't have to now go spend weeks creating a PowerPoint that really isn't going to be effective and wasting your time on those things. Let us handle those. And we have that conversation to make sure we're not missing something. But if we do see over time, and this is the beauty of the analytics side, if we do see over time that there's an increased, misunderstanding through the comprehension in the platform, we can see in real time, wow, man, every site is getting these questions wrong. Okay, right. The training, like something's going on. So something's wrong there. Is the training not right? Did we not put it? Are we missing something? So it'll be able to flag us to say, okay, we need to create another module, or we need to change a specific module. But we also build in at least 15 minutes. And I would say our packages are, somewhere, our standard package is probably between 2 to 2.5 hours of content that we would suggest typically. And those are micro learning. So it's kind of, 2 to 5 minute bite-sized pieces. Like you don't have to do everything all at once. You can come back, let's say if, hey, you need to complete the training ahead of your SIV, assign it out 2 weeks ahead of time, try to carve out enough time to kind of get it done. But we can update and include kind of, hey, look, you're going to learn. Things are going to change. Let's include at least 15 minutes of new content that we'll create based on best practice, key learnings, things that are just like, hey, we thought this way, but it ended up being something different, and we need to kind of put out some new content. We're always monitoring and looking for that feedback for sure. And then you also have at every step away in the platform, you have the ability, depending on your role, because it's very role based and what you need to complete, what's required, what's optional. And depending on where you are, you would be able to, like if you're a coordinator, you would email your medical monitor. If you're a medical monitor, maybe you'd email the sponsor study team. And it's all clickable and linkable and predefined already in the system for like where your questions would go to.
Well, that's fantastic. Sounds very, very, very interesting. And when it comes to the very frequent but not appreciated amendments that happen with every study, how quickly do you guys come in and replace the material that need to be changed, or highlight any kind of changes for the sites? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, so I mean, amendments, of course, are par for the course. We always plan for them. Unfortunately, this is not, because we're not just slapping together some slides. It's not something that happens overnight, but it is something that we build into our package to include amendment changes. Especially smaller ones. Larger ones, we'd have to look at that, and scope it out. But, depending on what it is, it could be a matter of a few weeks, potentially to update. Again, you're talking about the way we do it, right? We're going to look at the amendment, we're going to digest it, we're going to focus on the key areas, we're going to highlight, we're going to write out storyboards, we're going to what's the visuals, what's the voiceovers, and then we're going to create that with our graphic artists. So that our process takes a lot of time because we're giving it the thought that it needs to make sure that the audience can understand.
Yeah, fantastic. The only side of it that I see that could be even pushed to the next level is the approach of gamifying the whole thing, like and especially when engaging the sites is we realize how much they have and in front of them to handle and how everybody's trying to fight for their attention. So in a way, I don't know if it's some sort of like compensation, like some sort of like gift prizes or some sort of system like that, where it might get some sort of like extra innovation
Absolutely.
level to it. So it'll be interesting to like you guys have the platform to do all of these options at the end of the day. So it's fantastic.
I mean, you sound like me talking to my team because I want to do this. We're not quite gamifying it yet. I mean, there's a little bit. I mean, maybe not gamification, but there's definitely a little bit of, hey, like especially dealing with very smart people, even though you're busy, they don't want to get their questions wrong, right? So like there is interactivity for our knowledge checks that we build in that kind of like, okay, are you drag and drop things, and it's not just static click, yes or no. So there are definitely some components of like, oh, which is this, what's the dosage regimen and which order do you put them in and things. So there's a little bit of that. It's kind of like a game, but not to the gamification like you're talking about. I think there is absolutely an opportunity. And I'm sorry, I mean, are you coming from the site side, the vendor side, sponsor side?
I've spent 10 years in business development and actually the clinical research side of things and earlier stages of drug development. Right now, I'm pursuing an entrepreneurial venture in the regulatory affairs side of things. So quite far from where we're at right now. Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you.
But no, I think you're right. I think the gamification is an opportunity for the whole industry. I mean, maybe not even just for protocol training. I mean, there's a lot more ways.
Well, Heather and I on the EDC side of things have toyed with the idea of allowing sites to see how they're performing on average against the rest of the trial sites. Enrollment rates, query rates, where do they sit within the overall trial? Mostly from just so they know where they sit perspective, not to shame them in any way or anything like that, but
competition, healthy competition. Right?
Yeah,
a little happy smiley face, a little angry man that's on the screen, whatever you need to do. Something that's a little bit more fun and interactive. Thumbs up.
Well, yeah, because I mean, obviously the faster the data gets entered, the cleaner it is. The faster the study progresses, and the quicker it gets done, faster people get paid, right?
And I think that was the feedback from some of the sites that we recently spoke to as well, prepping for the seminar, which is like, if you want to get feedback on the solution, on what's working, what's not working, you got to give them a gift card, give them some incentive, because everybody's busy and why should I give feedback on this one system? I'm dealing with 15 different systems, so it definitely goes with that.
Yeah. Madison, did you have any stories to share from your perspective on training that's been done well from different organizations you've worked with in the past, or ones that haven't gone well at all?
So majority of the industry studies have been okay. We've had a couple that have had videos, interactive videos aside from the site initiation visit PowerPoint, which I find were more interesting. So you watch the video and do a little quiz after. So it was more interactive than just kind of sitting there listening to someone talk and throw some stuff up on a PowerPoint. But unfortunately, that's what majority of our training is, or it's through Zoom now with a PowerPoint. So it's and then you just have the PowerPoint to reference. And I personally like having videos that I can go back on to, if I'm not sure how to do a certain part of the protocol, or something changes with dosing, I can go back and kind of reference a more interactive video that kind of better explains it versus just a couple little bullet points on a slide.
Excellent. And Sarah, have you had a similar experience yourself or a different one?
You know, for me, when I'm doing remote training on slides, I write in there to specifically stop and ask the site questions to induce them to so that they engage, because otherwise I think we all just sit there and zone out. You know, it's important for that interaction to occur. Right, exactly. But one of the things I thought was super interesting is that you were talking about disclosing like the centralized monitoring data to other sites. In particular, I'm thinking of one of my sites where the coordinators are fellows and their data is not as it's not as consistent as some sites that have dedicated coordinators. Right. And to be able to show that because for fellows, that's important to see that, hey, this is your data that you're producing compared to what the rest of the study is doing. I think it could be a really strong motivator, especially for those types of institutions.
Definitely an opportunity there.
Let's
I
do
think
validation. Now I really want to do this.
No, coming from the business development kind of sales world, the last 13 years of my career, certainly creating healthy competitions, friendly competitions, like, will the sites be like, oh, well, I want to have a better enrollment rate, or I want to have a lower deviation rate, or I want, like, what are those metrics that, maybe if you showed that in like a dashboard and you could just, it's like the leaderboard, right? I mean, I don't know, I play Words with Friends a lot. I don't know if any of you guys plays Words with Friends. So I'm always checking the leaderboard. Where am I in the leaderboard? For my points. So like, yeah, what if there's like a leaderboard gamification type, thing that maybe the site coordinators or the people running the site could actually then push out to their team and compare, like, hey, for this study, we're the #1 site in XYZ. Maybe there's an incentive there.
From a site perspective, I definitely agree. We had that for one of our trials that we did, where we had a prize at the end, but it was comparing the different sites within Canada, what your recruitment was, are you at your target? We didn't have the data side of it, but I personally am a competitive person. So for me, it was helpful to kind of try and push my team to, reach our targets and our quotas and our deliverables in order to kind of be the best.
I like this.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we're all similar in that sense. I know I am, and if without any context, I'll proceed at a particular pace that I think is reasonable. Mm-hmm. But if I know that it's just because, for example, with my fitness app, somehow I'm always just below average. And in my mind, I'm like a superstar, whatever. So knowing where I sit actually helps motivate me. So it makes sense here too.
I'll correct you next time, Christopher. Don't worry. Just give me a call.
You got to speed it up.
That's funny though, but it's true. And I've heard this feedback from a lot of folks. It's actually, Michael and I are doing, I don't know if anybody is here, is on Clubhouse, but we're talking about this exact thing on Friday about application of gamification in site engagement, in patient engagement. Can this extend to patients? How do we get that patient that's doing an ePro at home for 4 weeks straight, every day, twice a day, to complete their paperwork and get those things done and do it on time? And sorry about that. So there's a real appetite in the industry, I think, because we've all been sitting at home thinking, how can this be more interesting? Yeah. This is what life is like as a patient. How do we make this whole thing work in a way that's it's tough stuff and it's just a little bit easier for everyone.
Yeah. Well, and Heather, in our conversation today about that one study we're starting up, was the ePro happening every 2 hours or something like that?
It's every 2 hours, bless their hearts.
Yeah. So yeah, which is, I mean, that's just, it's mostly ePro data. There's some CRFs, but it's primarily ePro driven data.
And it's only for a short window. It's only for a few days, but it's intense. It's intense. Yeah.
So one topic that's been coming up and that we're heading in that direction is patient education, and a lot of it around the patient journey, right? Like, does the patient know why it's important that they update their ePro every 2 hours? Right? Like, does the patient really understand why they're being asked to do what they're doing? And I think that there's a big opportunity there to just reinforce it, to have them on board, to be like, oh wow, okay, I get why they're asking me to do that. Now it makes sense. Okay, I'm gonna be more willing to do that, and versus just like, man, I signed up for this thing. I thought it was gonna be once a month. Now it's every 2 hours. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Right, because they know and they've been consented. The conversation has happened, but to what attention span and how long ago, like to your point, it doesn't take long for life to get in the way when you think you were going to call your mom on the weekend and it's been 2 months, right? It's just so easy for that to happen. So the ways that we can
really pay attention when during e-consent.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big deal. And I mean, patients want to do well. They want to be safe. They want to be healthy, that they're doing this for a reason. It's not, most patients don't do a trial just because they're altruistic. There's a real reason for it. So if we can make that journey easier for them, what can we do? Then that's important. And make it easier for the site to help them, because if it's easier for a site, they've got more time for those patients.
Definitely. Yeah.
And sometimes there needs to be some sort of pushback where like that kind of 2-hour requirement is just, not right. And there's a way around it. And somebody has to have that kind of tough discussion with the sponsor to really tell them that, look, this is typically what the regulatory authorities would expect to see. So what's the point of doing it at that frequency? I know you're being extra safe, but that at the end of the day, we're not going to be able to recruit, and we're going to lose a lot of patients because you're asking them to do things that are too invasive to their lifestyle. So I think that there's like that fine balance that needs to happen early on. Yeah.
Some of those topics got brought up. Sorry, excuse me. During this working group that we were holding at Clinical Trials Ontario, where we've been talking about like kind of the decentralization of clinical trials and different strategies to do that, and sort of like the does the patient really understand really came up when we were talking about direct to patient investigational product, or sending nurses into the home about like, can you actually store this in your fridge, and do you know how to unbox this? And from what we heard with some of the patient conversations, it's like they're like, this is great, totally happy to take on this extra burden and do all these logistics. Just like explain it to me. Like, you need more communication. Right. And they're perfectly cool with it as long as you communicate and maybe have a coordinator to like sit down and do the first unboxing with them. And this is all the paperwork you have to store and all this. But it's all these things are coming into focus right now with COVID, and now all the trial strategies being switched to virtual, which like almost by definition, you're putting additional burden on patients in order to do things, which can be okay, but we have to work with them.
Yeah, that's a good point. I know we're moving in that direction, and a lot of the trials that we're involved in now are like that, but I hadn't considered the additional burden it might place on the patients.
Well, understanding equipment, anything that involves any sort of mechanical equipment is a huge deal. And that's been a real issue. It's just understanding how to navigate things in your house that you've never had to use before.
Yeah.
Other strange things like cold chain supply, and you have to like coordinate the delivery of the package such that the temperature never changes with the medication and everything like that. They can't just leave it on the doorstep, right? Like they have to hand it off to somebody. So there's just lots of things. A really interesting example, like if you're able to catch during the conference earlier today on the Alberta trial for the COVID hydroxychloroquine, that they did it 100% virtually. It was like super interesting to hear that story.
That's awesome.
Oh, I missed that one.
Yeah, I unfortunately didn't catch it.
We should have all the presentations and all that like are archived on the platform, and we're probably also going to release them on YouTube.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, because there's a lot that I do want to go back and see. On this topic, Malachi, we're working with our CRO partners to factor into their study designs the use of wearable devices like for tracking actigraphy data, like activity data. So Shimmer Sensing is one partner we're working with. Another one is Spencer Health Solutions that has the little Spencer device. It's a drug dispensation device that sits in the patient's home, does the drug dispensation. They can do ePro on the machine itself, and they can also do telemedicine visits with the PI. In the training that you guys do, if you're aware that those components are part of the trial design, would you guys factor that into the training material as well? I know we just talked about the EDC side, but it's only now that I thought about all these other devices that might be involved in the trial itself.
Absolutely, and especially as it goes to DCT, right? The more that we're going decentralized and or hybrid, absolutely. I mean, those are definitely, you know, kind of, in some cases they might be kind of custom add-ons, you know, to the core training, because already we're already getting some pushback from sponsors on just like, okay, this all is wonderful, but like, okay, that's even getting somebody to take 2 hours of content, that's going to be a lot. So now you're going to add on all these different pieces, then it increases the amount of training that they need. But from the direct to patient standpoint, I think that's really where an opportunity is for the sites, you know, if they're meeting with them in person, if not, they're doing it virtually, that they can actually review these training modules that could be 2 minutes long with them on, oh, by the way, here's a quick 2-minute video for, you know, your dispense, solution that's going to be sent to your house. And then make those available directly to the patients as well.
Yeah.
Not just to be sitting with, you know, whatever the nurse or whoever the person is that might be onboarding that patient after they enroll. But absolutely, that's kind of where we're going for the next steps that we're having conversations with. And we're getting to the point where some of our sponsors, our voice hasn't been very loud, but we're starting to kind of build it in at the beginning of trials. Of like, we're catching some issues. I think maybe, I mean, you mentioned that, you know, like the complexities of the protocols, we're reading them and digesting them going, patients not going to want to do this. We're like, hey, sponsor, maybe you should think about changing this part, but we're not really, you know, once they're bringing us on board to do training, they're not really like asking us to give them feedback on the protocol.
Too late, yeah.
But we do, you know, depending on the relationship with the study team, we might actually, you know, voice that feedback.
Yeah.
Well, and I would imagine, because it happens for us as well, you know, the more we work with a particular CRO or a sponsor, we get to understand their style of designing trials. And so, you know, we're all right off the bat, we're able to provide them with feedback. You know, like, this just doesn't make sense the way you're proposing this. It's just going to be, you know, too much on data management or something like that. So I suspect the same would be for you guys as well. The first blush through a protocol, you'd be able to zero in and say, this, and this look really complicated based on what we've seen, you know, over the last 25 years of doing this. Right.
Yep. Definitely.
So Malachi, my other question for you is how, like, in the perfect scenario, at what point in the study design would you guys get involved?
It's typically right at the end of finalizing. So
okay.
I would say, you know, we can start work off of a draft protocol, but obviously nothing that, if it's going to change significantly, then that we probably wouldn't want to start working on it. But if it's probably in that, you know, the last 30 days of review, but it's still a draft phase, but it's going to be approved in the next month or so. Yeah, that's probably fine. We really only need, you know, 90 days out from IM is probably the tightest that we would want to put it, from like, you know, contracting and like defining an SOW.
Yep.
But and then typically, you know, your phase 3s, those are going to be the right target. Actually, I'll send you a separate note.
And that was actually going to be my next question.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the recent conversation that we're having. So I think the phase 3s are really, you know, because they're the most complex. You have the most variability. You know, typically they're going to have more sites. It's going to be different cultures.
Yep.
You know, and if the study is complex already with multiple arms or multiple endpoints, I mean, you're increasing that by however many fold, 100-fold, 400-fold. You know, we're doing a 400 site study right now, which of course is extremely complex. And so phase 3s are definitely the sweet spot, but I mean, we're doing phase 1s that are, you know, that are like almost like 5, you know, one of them right now, it's testing different bloodborne tumors versus solid tumors, and it's got 5 different arms, and each arm has, I mean, it's like 5 studies in one, even though it's 10 sites, right? So like, they're like, oh my God, yes, the solution's perfect. Like, we need this, because they're definitely going to mess up. So it's not only for the phase 3s in the phase 2s, but obviously the more complex, the better, you know, the better for it. But I think in general, you know, unless you are truly, you have extra people to handhold your sites and PIs and you have those great relationships and you trust them, the solution is needed, whether it's a standard defined trial or organized trial, or whether it's a decentralized, a hybrid. The ability to kind of just make sure that everybody that is touching any part of the trial understands what the protocol is, understands what the IP is, understands what the mechanisms are, understands the inclusion criteria, understands all those pieces so that you get the best data in the shortest amount of timelines, save money, and ultimately get the drug to the patients faster.
Yeah, exactly. And do you guys normally contract with the CRO, or is it directly with the sponsor?
We've done both.
It's a mix, but
We've done both. I'd say we got our start, through the CRO channel, and it has its own challenges. But I'd say that as long as we're considered and included as part of the core study team, it doesn't really matter if we go sponsor or CRO.
Right.
But if you start getting put aside and kind of, the game of telephone starts, it's a little more difficult to manage.
And have you got any, any metrics that you can share, or at least some insight into, how the platform has actually helped improve the performance of trials?
Yeah, I would say, right now we're seeing, especially on the complex phase 3s, because they just have, more data points, probably about a 20%, increase or savings of time, from an overall standpoint of the study itself. So it may not be 20% faster, but it's not delaying by 20%, right? So it's a 2-year study. It's not going to delay, a few months. It'll complete on time or potentially earlier, because I kind of equate it to making sure that everybody's trained. You get the right patients in, you're treating them in the right way so that you don't lose that data. So it's like booking an airline. Like, you always want a full plane, right? But you never only book the 236 seats that are on the plane. You book for the 270 because people are going to cancel and people aren't going to show up, and stuff's going to happen. So I mean, trials are run very similar, right? Like, hey, we have 236 people that we need to get data points on, we think, to prove our endpoints, but we're probably going to have to enroll more to get to that 236. But if you actually can get the data out of those 236, you don't have to enroll those extra ones. You don't have to remonitor them. So you're not only just saving time overall, but you're saving remonitoring costs. You're saving sponsor and or CRO time for actually creating training, right? You're saving CRA time, you're saving PI time, you're saving medical monitor time, because think about it today in the normal traditional process of an IM and an SIV, not as necessarily a decentralized trial, where if you do this training up front ahead of time going in, you can have a 1 to 2 hour IM and focus very, very clearly on the clinical scenarios, on the real world scenarios, or because you have the metrics of what they've comprehended, you can now say, okay, well, these 3 questions, these 3 areas, they didn't really get and understand, let's focus on those.
Yeah.
So you have a much more focus. And now instead of doing a 4 to 8 hour IM or SIV, where everybody, however many people are on that from the sponsor, they got to plan, they got to prep for that. You're saving all of that time. I mean, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars of savings. And then if you could actually result in shortening or not delaying that trial, and that drug actually gets to market faster, now you're talking about millions of dollars in recouped revenue because you've gotten that out. So all of those pieces kind of add up, and maybe not every study is going to benefit from every single one of those, but we're saving some significant costs from an operational standpoint.
I'd be curious to know if any sites have ever come back to anyone and said, we've just been trained too much. The information is too clear. The things that we always hear is there just wasn't enough time, and the resources we have access to are in a bunch of different places or very disparate, and don't tell me where the handoff is between the two. They come close, but that relationship between, say, us as an EDC vendor and maybe a CTMS company or something else that we might not be offering, we never have a conversation. As the vendor to this partner we're all working with, we are not connected to them to be able to say, does where I stop and where you start actually connect? So I can see the value in what you're talking about, to be able to sort of bridge that, here's where this ends and that begins, to make it easier for those sites to not have to think about it.
Yeah, unfortunately, you can't get away from all of the systems until, there's only 4 companies left in the world and everybody buys them. So, I mean, I don't know how we get away from the biggest industry problem of just the sites have to log into 10 to 15 systems. I don't know how we get away from that.
That's our next product.
And I mean, even if you combine, even if this one study, we're trying to get 15 vendors down to 3, so that they're logging in for like, hey, if you want to get to 7 different vendors, you go to this one login portal, and then you can get to all the different platforms from that login. But then you're really only having to log into 3 different systems for this one trial instead of 15.
Yeah.
So we're in the process of doing things like that, but that's an opportunity that we have from an industry standpoint to connect things up, right? And have the backends that all this data have it talk to each other, right? So you can trigger, one use case that is an opportunity for us, Chris, that we've already defined and we're working on it, of course, is, when you get to that point where, let's say you haven't been proactive and you see bad data showing up, you could query, if our systems were connected, you could query and then say, okay, well, where did that data come from? That came from this patient in this site. Okay, was that site trained? Pull up our platform. That site never did their training. Duh.
Yep.
Like, yeah, of course there's errors.
Or they did it, but they've got new staff.
They didn't, or they got new staff, they got turnover, something happened, we didn't re-push it. I think that the best part of what the data and systems talking to each other can bring is you don't get to the bad data. Right? You get to the point where before a visit, you put a check in and say, okay, there's a new dosage coming up at visit 5, whatever it may be, and query the system, is everybody trained and did they comprehend? And you look at the data before you roll that out. And then you go, oh, wow, no, actually, they didn't complete their training. And then the ones that did, they're having issues with X, Y, Z area. Let's make sure we push it out. Let's set up a separate call with that site, even if it's just an hour, to go through the scenarios, whatever they're struggling with. Boom, now roll it out. Now you got clean data. That's the opportunity.
Yeah, so we're with TrialStat, we are we're an open platform, and our goal is to be fully interoperable with any other third-party technology. So one area that we do focus on is single sign-on. So for all of our preferred partners, one of our first goals is to develop that single sign-on solution. So if they sign into EDC, they can then jump into ScienceMedia. They can then, open the nuclear medicine viewer. They can go into the CTMS if they need to. They don't have to sign in and out of systems. That's just one piece.
It's helpful, yeah, but that's the first step, right?
Yeah.
That's the first step.
Yeah.
Well, we're talking about, when I joined at the end of 2019, I was like, oh, cool, okay, that integration, a target integration with an EDC platform was a goal for end of 2020. I was like, yeah, we can make that happen. That's easy. I come from a SaaS, technology background. I'm like, that's nothing. Then I'm like, oh wow, except for this industry just does not move quick.
Well, that's the other challenge that we recognized, because I've been doing this for over 15 years on the data management side. And all of the competitors in this space are very reluctant to innovate on their platforms, but they're definitely afraid of trying to integrate with anything. They just have their focus on, this is the technology we provide. You can use it as it is, but that's it. And the whole industry is getting very frustrated with that. Sponsors, the CROs are frustrated with it. Regulatory authorities are starting to, pound their fist a little bit about, breaking down these silos and working together more. So I think and the pandemic has actually helped push the whole thing forward to a certain extent.
Yeah, it has.
Awesome. If we're on the hour, if there are any questions that we haven't had a chance to address from you guys, by all means, ask away. Otherwise, we can wrap up.
Hey, Chris and Malachi, with your approval here, I wanted to add a comment about my experience with SMI trial. I think one of the things that's really critical, especially in site training, is that your training not be punitive. None of these people want to be sitting there, being told how stupid they are and they didn't get that right, and et cetera. And one of the beautiful things about SMI trial is the integration of these knowledge checks, which actually allows them, anybody who's taking the course, to self-appraise where they are and where they need to go back and get things. And where this the rubber really meets the road is recognizing that under the ICH guidelines, basically all of these sites are, in a scenario where the sponsor is still responsible for the proof of the pudding. Did the training actually happen, and did they complete it? And so it is to the sponsor's benefit to make sure that the training that's implemented is something that is encouraging and supportive, as opposed to just simply an accreditation based on did you get this right or wrong? So Malachi and the team there at ScienceMedia have done a really outstanding job. And yeah, I was part of, kind of helping to design all of this, but the reality is understanding that the sites are under so much pressure to perform that the last thing you need is punitive training. And so, plaudits to what ScienceMedia is doing in that regard. And if it integrates into what you're doing at TrialStat, that makes even more sense. So
Perfect.
Hope you didn't mind the comment.
Oh, that was fantastic. Thanks, Michael.
Don't mind that. And, I guess at his point, the knowledge checks are kind of this principles of adult learning. It's just built into the training, and they're not graded. So they can get them wrong. It shows them the answer. They can go back after if they didn't feel they understood it, well, they can go back and retrain. And then before they take the comprehension, which is more of that's a pass fail.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, Malachi, thank you for being our guest and showing us the platform. This was absolutely fantastic. Thank you to everyone else for joining. I'm glad you could all make it in. I know we had some technical difficulties. There were some people who still couldn't get in. I'm going to blame Zoom. The link's the same. Who knows why it didn't work, but I'm really glad everyone was able to join. This was fantastic.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Bye,
Yeah, it's good to see
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thanks for joining us. Hope to see you another time soon.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Bye.
watching. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.